from Patterns for Pirates, and I'm going to be sewing up some Busy Bee swim bottoms with you today. I have a adult size medium with a mid-rise and ruched option. I'm going to be fully lining these today. My main fabric is going to be this solid green, and my lining fabric is going to be this solid beige. Alright, let's get started. Alright, again I'm going to be fully lining these. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to take my lining and I'm going to align them at the crotch. And I'm going to baste this. I'm going to repeat the same thing on my main fabric. This is just because sewing together 4 layers of swim can be a lot without one of them at least slipping out of place. So I just like to baste these together so it's easier to get all 4 layers together. Basting stitch is your longest straight stitch that your machine has. This is just to temporarily hold it in place while you're doing your final stitch. Might seem like something that is adding time unnecessarily to sewing, but if you baste a lot in your swimwear, you will have a much easier sew in the end. Swim can be super slippery. I'm putting my lining and my main fabrics both right sides together as well when I'm basting this crotch seam. Alright, now that I have excuse me, now that I have my main basted together right sides together and my lining basted right sides together, I'm going to match both the fronts and put front to front. So in order, I have my main back facing right sides up, my main front facing right sides down so that my 2 main fabrics are right sides together. Then I have my lining front facing right sides up and my lining back facing right sides down so that my lining fabrics are also facing right sides together. Now I'm going to stitch this all at once. And what this is going to do is it's going to hide our seam. Sometimes it helps if you turn your machine on. This is a 3/8 seam allowance, so I basted at an 1/8 of an inch, and now I'm trimming that off. My knife is going right over that seam line where I basted. Which is nice and convenient because now I don't have to remove the basting stitches. Alright, so what that does is when you open it up, it hides that seam in there with only having 1 seam. So you can also sew your 2 lining together and your main together and then put them together. But this way there's only 1 serged seam versus 2, so it's a little less bulky. It's really nice to do that way. Now what we're going to do is, since I have the ruched option, I'm going to be gathering these main fabric. Oh, so sorry. Now what I'm going to be doing is gathering my side seams to match my lining. So I'm going to grab my 2 elastic pieces that the cut chart told me, and this is what I'm going to be gathering this to. So what I'm going to be doing is running a basting stitch on all 4 side seams, the 2 on the front and 2 in the back, And I'm going to start about 3/4 to an inch away from the edges. I usually do it an inch away from the edges. That gives 1/4 of an inch of space where it's not gathered, but you can, if you want your gathering to start immediately from your elastic on the top and bottom, you can start at 3/4. It really will make a huge difference either way. But I'm just going to mark that on all of my side seams and go to my sewing machine and run a basting stitch at 1/8 of an inch from the edge, so right on the edge, and then again about 1/2 inch away. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me a basting stitch both inside and outside of the actual seam, and that's going to give me a really gorgeous gather. I highly recommend not skipping the 2 basting stitches on all 4 side seams. This gives you a beautiful gather, and if you skip any of it, you're not going to be happy with your gathers. Okay, so I have ran all my basting stitches on all of my side seams. There's 2 ways you can do it. You can either, if you're fully lining, you can use your excuse me, your lining piece to make sure you're gathering it enough, or if you are not fully lining, you're partially lining, you can use your elastic piece to make sure you're gathering enough. But what I like to do is go ahead and just start gathering. I always like to pull my bobbin threads. I think it's a little smoother. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my lining piece right here to just kind of gauge about how much I need to gather. Okay, now I'm going to check it. And you can see it's not gathered on the top and the bottom. Okay, so I gathered it a little too much, so I'm going to loosen up my gathers a little bit. See how that is? Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to pin, actually I'm just going to tie off my bobbin thread so it doesn't move around while I do the same thing to the 3 other side seams. Alright, here we are. I've already finished one of my side seams and I'm going to show you my second side seam. So what I have done is I have run a basting stitch about 1/8 away from the edge, and another basting stitch 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch away from the edge. On my front and my back side seams, I start about 3/4 to an inch away from these edges. We don't want any gathering on the top and the bottom because this is where our elastic is going to attach and fold to the wrong side. Then I gathered this to match my elastic and the cut chart. So my 3/4 of an inch on the front and the back. Okay, that's where my gathering stitch starts, right? From my gathering stitches, I want to match my elastic. Okay, if you're fully lining as well, you can also match it to your lining pieces. It should match perfectly from side seam to side seam now. And now what I've done is I have gathered both sides, and now I've basted these together, right sides together. My lining is basted right sides together. And now I'm going to place them on top so that it's the same as when we did our crotch piece. So as you can see, here's my seam for the crotch piece. So my main sides are right sides together, and my lining is right sides together, and they're all piled together in the same order so that I can see my seam and the crotch. I'm going to baste these together, and then we're going to add the elastic as well. Remember, a baste is just your longest straight stitch. You can baste these at whatever seam allowance you want. Remember, a baste is just a temporary stitch to hold it in place. I'm doing about 1/2 inch, which means I will have to pull it out after I stitch. That's okay. Here's my white thread, is the basting stitch that I just did. And now what we're going to do is attach our elastic. So it goes right where the gathering is. It should be 3/4 of an inch away from the top and the bottom. And it's just going to be attached at 3/8 of an inch. So my gathering stitch that I did about 1/8 of an inch away is what I'm going to use to kind of guide myself. Now you can use your serger here, or you can use your machine, it doesn't matter. I'm going to use a lightning stitch, and I'm going to be 3/8 inch away. And the goal here is to get the elastic right into that seam. And what it's going to do is it's going to hold your gathering. It's going to stabilize your gathering. If you skip the elastic, you'll notice you kind of lose your gathers. Same thing as if you don't baste inside and outside of your seam allowance, you will also lose your gathers. It's kind of magic, honestly. You can gather it, and then if you don't do all of these things when you're done, you'll open it up and you'll go, but I swear I gathered that fabric. I'm going to go through it with my serger as well, just so that my edges are nice and finished. If you do not have a serger, it's fine. You can trim those off if you want to trim your seam allowance some. I'm going to turn on my knife and just trim those edges that 1/8 of an inch. You don't want to trim your elastic at all, so be careful with that. And you can take out your basting stitches now. I usually wait till the very, very, very end. So I'm going to attach my leg elastic, and then we'll be done. Okay, so I've basted around all my edges, and I'm ready to attach my elastic. I'm just going to trim off any serger tails that I still have left, because when I attach my elastic, I do not like to have my blade on. Okay, I think I got them all. I am going to grab my leg elastic measurement, You can use the leg measurements as a guide. Depending on what kind of swim elastic you're using, you might want it a little tighter, you might want it a little looser. It's also a big preference on how tight you like it on the booty curve. So you can start here, right, all along the front, and you can pin it where you're not stretching it because you do not want to stretch your elastic. You don't want to stretch your swimsuit either. You just want them nice and even. And then you can know that's how much you're going to need to stretch the back. So I'm going to overlap right here. Do the same thing, slide it under there, put my needle down, my blade off, doing an adult, so I'm probably going to get some gathering along the back booty curve. If you're doing a youth, you might not. This is the fuller coverage brief option I'm doing here, so it will also have more gathering than the cheeky option. The bigger the booty curve is, the more you feel like you're having to stretch. There you go. So as you can see, I have some slight gathers along the booty curve. When I fold it under, it's going to be top stitched at a little bit bigger spot, so I'll have a little bit less gathering when I top stitch. And then along the front, there should be no gathering and no waviness. It's just, should be exactly the same. You can pull your basting stitches now. Again, you can leave them in there or you can pull them out. Okay. Okay, here's my other leg elastic. Since I'm going the other way this time, I'm not going to pin it all the way around. I'm just going to go for it. Since I'll be heading in the direction of the front first. I'm just going to not stretch as I'm attaching it here. Okay, here's where the stretching needs to start, so I'm just going to go back and pin my 1/2 inch overlap right here. Okay, and that's how much I need to stretch along this booty. Reasons why you want to stretch along the booty curve. One is because when you have a curve that curves outwards, once you top stitch it, it's going to be stitched at a different spot. And another one is just to keep it tucked under those cheeks. That's why the fuller coverage option stretches more, because it is supposed to tuck under the cheeks, whereas a cheeky version doesn't get stretched as much because it's not supposed to stay tucked under there. It's supposed to let the cheeks free. Alright, so the waist option I don't have a measurement for. I grade between my waist, so it's somewhere in between. On the mid-rise, I have a size small waist and a medium hip. So my waist at the high rise is a small, and at the low rise is pretty much a medium, but this is a mid-rise, so it's somewhere in between a medium and a small. So I'm just going to attach it 1 to 1. I honestly always find this easier than using any kind of measurement. I just let it come off my elastic and let it feed in as I'm sewing. Kind of saves time in cutting and measuring a piece. I'm already back around to the front, and I just cut that 1/2 inch overlap. Okay. Alright, we got all of our elastic in. Gonna have to change my thread color to Topstitch. Just gonna pull my basting stitches. Alright, it's really easy to pull basting stitches from stretch fabric. Just kind of pull and they just kind of pop right out. So baste away, baste. Anytime you have multiple layers, it helps so much, and it's really quick and easy to pull basting stitches out of super stretchy knit like this, because the basting stitches will just pop for you. Here we go. Alright, I'm going to change my color and then we'll be top stitching. Alright, here we are ready to top stitch our elastic around the legs and waist of our Busy Bee swim bottoms. I'm going to be using my sewing machine this time. You can also use your cover stitch if you have a cover stitch. I'm going to be picking this triple step zigzag. I just use it straight off my machine. I do not change the stitch width or length. I find it naturally incredibly stretchy, which is great for swim fabric since swim fabric stretches so much. All I'm going to do is fold my elastic down, and I'm going to go ahead and pin it in a few spots like the side seams, center front, center back. This is just to make sure I'm not stretching or easing anything on accident. The elastic is much more stable than the swim fabric, so sometimes it's easy to accidentally ease something in when you're doing something so stable versus so stretchy. So I just like to throw in a few pins to make sure I am not doing that. You're just going to be folding it down. You'd want to make sure there's no extra fabric on top here. You want it nice and smooth all around. Since I'm using my sewing machine, I'm going to sew from the wrong side. It doesn't matter as long as your bobbin thread is matching. If you're using your cover stitch, you'll have to sew from the top side. You just want to make sure that the edge of your stitch is getting the edge of your swim fabric here. Couple tricks that I've seen and heard around through the years of sewing to get your sewing machine not to stretch and pull out your fabric. One is to put your finger right here by the presser foot. You don't want to lift up. You just want to put it there, and all it does is lift up a little tiny bit some of the tension Now when you get to a seam allowance, you can lift the foot up kind of to be even with that seam allowance so it can get up and over. Another one that I've seen is you put your hand on the back. Let's see if I can get a better shot. Kind of put your finger back here, and while it's feeding in, you kind of hold the fabric in the back so that it's really not stretching it. I usually put my finger on the presser foot, and depending on the fabric that I'm sewing, how stretchy it is, how stable it is, I really like that trick. All it does is keep it from having too much pressure on the foot. My machine is one that you cannot adjust the pressure foot. Most home sewing machines that don't have a super big price tag do not have that. I have never been one to use a walking foot. A lot of people swear by walking foot, so if you have one, you can always try it out. So there's my finished top stitch. As you can see, I don't have any waves, no gathers. The waist should look just the same. Shouldn't look bigger than it did before you put the elastic in. It shouldn't look tighter. Should just look more stable. That's all we're doing, is adding some stability and making sure that even when it gets wet, when the fabric gets wet, it's going to stay where it's supposed to stay. Which is important when you're wearing a small amount of fabric, right? It's only covering so much anyways. You want it to stay in place. So I'm just going to repeat that on the two legs. And it's even more vital on these legs that you pin it, because you're sewing around a lot of curves. When you're sewing around curves, where you attached it and where you're top stitching is always going to be a slightly different length. So it's really important to pin it all around and make sure that you are stretching it evenly as you're sewing it. Again, this back booty curve has some gathers. What we're going to do is stretch it until the gathers disappear while we're top stitching it. We don't want to sew any gathers in place to where it wouldn't be able to stretch to put on. So you might feel a little bit like an octopus here, trying to stretch out the gathers and make sure there's no extra fabric on this side. Try to make sure your fabric isn't getting stretched through. This one is a skill that you're probably going to have to practice a few times before you're super comfortable with. We don't really need to stretch much. You do have to stretch some, if you can see, because where we attached it and now where we're top stitching is a slightly longer line than where we attached. So even though we did not stretch this elastic as we attached, we're having to stretch it now a little bit because it's being sewn to a longer line. It's very slightly, but that's why it's important to pin to make sure you are stretching evenly. here's our finished leg. Here's the front. Again, the front should be just like the waistband. It shouldn't look wavy, shouldn't look looser, shouldn't look tighter. It should be exactly the same as before you added it. And the booty should look slightly tighter, okay, because we stretched the booty. And I have one more leg line to go. I'll do that very quickly. All done, we can give it a little shake. And see our final work. Now here's my back with its slight gathers around. Don't worry about the gathers though. When you put your booty into it, your booty will smooth out those curves. So the only thing I have left to do is pull my gathering stitches from my side seams. I like to wait till the very end to do that. I feel like it really keeps my gathers kind of out of the way when I am stitching this elastic. So I recommend leaving that till the very, very end. Just kind of keeps it all nice and tidy while you're working on the rest of your suit. There we go. And now we'll be ready to go swimming. There we go. Nice and easy to pull. I have one of my bobbin threads hiding in there. There we go. All right, there's our finished Busy Bee bottoms. These are fully lined and the mid-rise ruched option. The ruching goes all the way across, so when you wear them, you're going to have to kind of pull this gathering all the way across. You don't, since these are fully lined, the lining won't let you pull it up. If you do the ruched option and they are not lined, you want to make sure you're wearing your waistband straight across and not pulling all the gathers out. If you want the gathers to show up all the way across, they will, as long as you wear your waistband straight across. See, just like this. And then the gathering on the back will all be kind of above your booty. It'll all kind of be right there, just like in the front. And then the booty will be pretty smooth. All right, I hope you enjoyed sewing with me. The Busy Bee swim bottoms, ruched option. They take a little bit longer than the plain option, but they're not too difficult. And they give you a really fun, cute option to wear. I can't wait to see yours. Please remember to share them wherever you like to share your sews, Instagram, Facebook, and the like. If you do a blog, don't forget to show us in the Facebook group as well. We love to see your finished sews. My favorite thing is seeing people happy with what they make from P4P patterns. So I hope you get a fabulous swimsuit out of these and feel confident and beautiful and ready to share with the world. Good luck, you guys.